Welcome back, everybody, to Chase's Sports News. I am your host, Chase Coburn. Today, as we preview the MAAC basketball season here in the 2025-26 college basketball season, I'm joined by the head coach of the Siena Saints men's basketball team, Gerry McNamara. Gerry, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So great to have you here. Obviously, you had so much success as a player at Syracuse, and now you're really hoping to build a MAAC powerhouse here at Siena. Just overall, what are the emotions as you head into the 2025-26 season?
Optimism, I think excitement, what we built off last year. I think the initial group last year kind of proved the fight they had. I think every coach is in the same boat in terms of going in the offseason, in terms of what you need as far as roster build and retention, who you keep, who you lose. I think we were really fortunate in that regard. We're returning 6 guys, 68% of your offense. And I think adding really quality pieces, 3 transfers and then 4 freshmen. I think our 4 freshmen are really talented, kind of stabilize the program moving forward, kind of determine our ceiling for this season. But I think going in terms of retention, you have a lot of optimism going into this year. And then, for me, just excitement in terms of the character piece. We've got so many great kids in our program that, I just really kind of love being around, and they give you everything they got every day. And I think when you're veteran guys, the guys that have played for you are your hardest workers, and they set the tone for you in practice every day. I'm just really lucky in that regard.
You talk about those who are returning, obviously Siena very lucky, Justice Schultz, Gavin Doty, Brendan Coyle, all those guys decided to return this year. I mean, last year, the most successful teams in the MAAC were those with, returning starting talent. So what will their impact be, and how much will their success dictate the overall success of the team this coming year?
It's going to be huge. Obviously, Justice being voted preseason first team, Gav being preseason second team. You've got a really quality backcourt. Brendan Coyle, I believe, led the league last year in 3-point shooting. He definitely led the league in getting fouled on 3-pointers. So those guys you're going to rely on heavily. Like I said, the 68% of the returning offense with those 3 players. But then the toughness factor of what they bring to you. You're not just relying on them for your point production and how you look during a game and through the season. You're relying on them in terms of the culture piece and what it means to work every day. I think that's where great programs, obviously, I think I've been doing it a long time. I think coaches sometimes get a little bit, we play a huge factor in the culture, but I think really it's determined by the character of the pieces that you bring in. And I've just got really high character in those guys, and they love to practice. I think that's where the piece that's overlooked a lot is the everyday work. I've got guys that really like to practice, and that's kind of hard to come by, especially when you're logging heavy minutes and playing a big role, or players that have returned that have already proved themselves. So for a younger group, 3 transfers and the 4 freshmen, you kind of need to show them what it looks like in terms of what I want it to be. And, those guys haven't missed a beat, but in terms of this season moving forward, they're going to play a huge factor in determining how high we can go.
For sure. It is the leadership, it is the experience, and then, of course, what they can do on the floor. And you mentioned, Justice being a first-team All-MAAC preseason, honoree. He's just been so prolific, and he's going to have another great season as well. A ton of those guys. You mentioned utilizing the transfer portal, a ton of newcomers this year. How do you plan to implement their skill sets as well to kind of really build a strong team here at Siena?
I think we needed to kind of bulk up a little bit physically in terms of what we looked like in our front court. And I think even if you look back at last year, the one thing I did like is we impacted shots at the rim. We led the league, I think, in blocks per game. So I didn't really want to sacrifice that aspect, but I did want to get a little bit more physical. You talk about Riley Mulvey, who we brought in from Iowa, which I'm really happy about because of his, not just being a local guy, but his coaching from Coach McCaffrey. He's played 4 years for a great coach, really smart kid. Has been dinged up a little bit, hurt the last few weeks, so we're trying to ease him back in. And then Tazzy Goodrick, I really love at the 5. Transfer from Gannon, can kind of do a little bit. We need him to be a little bit more aggressive offensively for us. And then Antonio Chandler, who's kind of a jack of all trades, elite level, potentially rebounder, really good slasher. But the one guy you can really add in that piece from our freshman class is Francis Folivak. He's really, really difficult to defend from 12 feet and in. If you don't send a second set of hands to dig at the ball, he's a handful to guard one-on-one in the post. And if you do, he's a terrific passer and unselfish player. So a little bit more physically up front, and not to take away against anything from last year, but we've got a little bit more physicality around the basket this season.
Right, but it's interesting. You mentioned how Siena did lead the entire conference in blocks per game, but they were towards the bottom in terms of, points allowed. So you think really being more physical is going to improve the overall defensive productivity?
I hope so. I really hope so. I can go back to the perimeter plays a big factor in that in terms of how many post touches you're giving up off the bounce and that those type of things. I think where Justice is probably underrated the most is obviously everybody pays attention to what he could do offensively. He's a terrific on-ball defender. But in terms of being able to guard 8 feet and in, we struggled a little bit when it was one-on-one. We had the length to contest. We just didn't have the physicality to
Sure.
disrupt when we couldn't block a shot. So it starts on the perimeter. Are we able to keep our paint touches low? And then it kind of finishes if you give up a post up. Are we physical enough to force off the block? We can't give up as many layups as we did last season. So I'm hoping collectively it makes a huge difference.
No, for sure. I mean, you got to hope. And this is a conference that, you need to be physical. This is a conference where anyone can win on any given night. It's considered one of the most physically demanding conferences in all of college basketball. What challenges come with just playing in a conference like the MAAC where any team can win on any given day?
Yeah, it's torturous to every game. It's coming down to the last minute. It seemed like, I'm pretty sure it's correct that our league was determined by the smallest margin of victory. So the closest games in the country were decided in the MAC. And I've said it here in the preseason when I've done interviews. I've just got a great appreciation for the players and coaches in this league. If you look around the league, I think it speaks volumes of two things: that the players think that it's a quality enough league to not have transferred, because a lot of people have retention. And I think it speaks volumes of the coaches, of the job they're doing, of the kids that they have on their program. So they've been able to coach them well, get those guys to believe in them enough that they really like playing for these coaches who are really good coaches. But then they think the product is good enough to compete at because they went through it. They understand how difficult it is to win. We go through a stretch in the season where we lost 4 games by a total of 5 points, and we missed 38 free throws in those 4 losses. So that's, for us, in terms of coaches, of how we communicate with our players and let them know how small the margin of victory and margin for error is. It's this much. You've got to make every play of every second of every possession. If that's the mindset, you're probably, hopefully, going to be on the right side of things.
No, for sure. And, while some teams are able to retain some players, there is a lot of roster turnover, around this entire conference. So, Gerry, I guess my question to you is, you mentioned returning 68% of your offense. What about Siena and what you've built here already entices players to want to stay here and want to win here?
There's a number of reasons. I think the history of the place. I think our fan support. We've got incredible fan support. Our arena's top notch. But even the campus is right to my left out my window here. I think there's just such a great mature feel to the campus. I'm used to a big campus. This is a smaller campus. The thing that I like is, our staff, we frequently go up and eat in the student dining hall. And the thing that really is fun for me to kind of observe is a lot of our guys are eating with students coming from class. And, there's just the continuity here, the intimacy here.
Yeah.
I think the familiarity with a lot of different students and running into each other often, I think real relationships are developed, and if you have the social aspect to go along with what we have in terms of our level of what we offer. We have a great practice facility, great playing facility, great support. And you add that social component in, it's just a great place. It's a great place to live. So I think our guys, when they go through it and they experience it and they see the support they have here with great people, I think it's just a fun place. And hopefully, I like to think we do our job in terms of these guys like playing for us and see the vision and hopefully have aspirations of winning championships.
We talk about the transfer portal and the NIL. It's a new landscape in college basketball, and you've had success previously, both as a coach and as a player, in this game. But the game has changed. How do you and Siena plan to stay on top of the change?
I think everybody in our league is trying to play catch up in terms of how do we compete in this era. And that starts, it's the big difference when you talk about, Power Fives and our level. I think for us to compete, it's going to be done kind of the old school way with this rev share model of we still got to go out and raise it. There's very few places in college basketball that turn a big revenue that can support themselves. It's just the reality, So
Right.
it's kind of the old school model of we've got, a lot of great donors, alumni that understand it. I think for a long time, people fought what's going on, and I understand that. It's a lot different than what we grew up in, and I think now everybody's come to grips of like, hey, this is the new model, and this is what it takes to compete. So we've got incredible support. I've got incredible support from the president and our athletic director, John Dargenio. So, just trying to put together a model that's sustainable in terms of getting character pieces along with being able to compete in the NIL landscape. And as long as you're in that mix where you're not just getting blown out of the water by other schools, you're going to be able, hopefully, with all the other things we talked about that this place has to offer, you're going to be able to compete for talent.
Obviously, it's a change. Do you think it's good for the game or bad for the game, considering you've been a part of, multiple different eras?
It depends on which way you look at it. I would have liked to think that if we won a national championship at Syracuse in 2003, that my conversation in that offseason would have been a good one, a productive one, and hopefully a lucrative one. And that's the advantage that these kids have. They've got an opportunity to monetize themselves. And, I think the old school in me hates part of it because I think it devalues the education process a little bit. The thing that I fear is that you got guys that are going to 4 schools in 4 years. You're transferring after your junior season, going into your senior year. A lot of those credits aren't going to transfer. So now you might have a little bit of extra money in your pocket because you kind of worked your way up the ladder in terms of level and made more money. But do you have a degree to show for it at the end of it? That's the fear that I have in a lot of these scenarios is, how much education are we walking away with in this thing? So that's the old school in me. And then there's still success stories, like there's still a lot of guys that I think are sticking it out in 1 or 2 places and still have the opportunity to endear themselves to a fan base and at the same time monetize themselves. Because the hard thing for me is the emotional piece for the fan, because it's easy to turn away from this at this point. Because every year it's like, all right, who's on the team this year? I like turnover because I love that emotional piece from a fan base of, hey, this kid was really, really promising as a freshman. Now he's coming back as a sophomore. Like, man, what a great sophomore year he's had. I can't wait to see him as a junior. And, now you're imprinting yourself as a player onto a community. And, the old school in me wants to see more of that, but I understand that these kids have opportunities that I didn't go through and I can't judge them for it.
Some of those principles that you could have learned at Syracuse, you mentioned being a national champion, you're in the Syracuse Hall of Fame, and then you were later an assistant coach under Jim Boeheim as well. What principles did you really learn there that you're hoping to apply here to Siena to make them a winner like the Orange were?
Yeah, I think more so than anything on the court was the loyalty, the family. That's what, of all the things, of all the great games and great accomplishments that happened on the court, I think what was built there was a family, a place for all of us that we had gone through to come back to. That's what I'm more so than anything trying to build here, even if it is on short term, because of the landscape we're in. I still want to create that environment. The relationships are important to me. I'm a father of 4. I've said it before, being a parent has kind of changed me. It's softened me a little bit. I'm a little more patient than I used to be, but at the same time, like, I understand that the kids I'm coaching, it's their experience, they're someone's child. And I'd like to think that, when I turned my child over to somebody and they got a chance to go experience something through them, that they make it a good one for them. And a lot of that isn't determined on your playing time. A lot of that is determined on how you're treated. You're not talked at, you're talked to. You're honest with these guys. And, that builds trust. And that's what every relationship should be built on. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do the best I can here, even in this model. But then all the other stuff, I'm just very fortunate that I was able to learn under a Hall of Fame coach, play and learn as a coach. And, kind of work my way up as an assistant, develop my own style, feel like what worked for me and what didn't. And, take the good from a lot of different people I've been around, because I've been around a lot of great coaches, and just kind of pull what you can, learn as much as you can. And when you get your opportunity like I have here, at the end of the day, you still got to be yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do the best of my ability.
And you mentioned being a winner, you've been a national champion, right? I mean, you have gotten to the top and to the epitome of what you want to achieve in college basketball. You look at what Siena can achieve. The MAAC preseason poll is out. This team was second, only behind Quinnipiac, and many actually view this team as the top team in the conference. So how will this group live up to that bar and then bring the Saints back to the NCAA tournament?
Well, we've got to be on the other end. That's I think to kind of what we touched on earlier, just a small margin of victory, this very little room for error. It's the little things within the game that you do that determine how good you can become, how much you win. And are we capable? Yeah, but I've got a lot of respect for how capable other teams in this league are as well. What Quinnipiac has coming back. I think Manhattan's going to be very good. Sacred Heart has a lot of retention, just to name a few. So for us, it's about how do we maximize our potential? How do I use this preseason in terms of the non-conference slate to get these freshmen who I think can really help us up to speed? Now, do you take some lumps in that stretch? You could, but is it better in the long run for what you ultimately need to become? I think the one thing I've got to figure out with us is in terms of offense, defense, of what our best lineups are, and can I get those best offensive lineups to get up to par with what our best defensive lineups are? Because, right now, I think that the biggest thing for us is I think Gavin Doty in particular, you look at how many different ways he can impact the game. I think with last year's lineup that we started with, Brendan Coyle obviously shoots the three really well. But you need like a Major Freeman who played for us last year. He took 6 threes a game for us. So Gav's got to expand his range because he shoots it really well. But it's got to be an aspect that he looks for consistently because it's good for our offense. Because now if you have 2 guys that are really capable along to go with Gav's ability to deck it and put it on the floor and make plays, it opens things up a little more for a guy like Justice showed. So just little things in terms of our lineup play, I think is going to be a determining factor of how we move forward. If I can ease some of these guys in to get up to par on both ends.
We're looking forward to seeing, what Siena can achieve this coming year. It's going to be a really, really fun MAAC season. And Coach, I wish you the best of luck on whatever Siena does. And, maybe we'll see you in Atlantic City for the MAAC tournament. So thank you so much, Coach. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you so much. We'll wrap it up here, everybody, alongside Gerry McNamara, the Syracuse Hall of Famer turned Siena men's basketball coach. I'm your host, Chase Coburn, saying so long from Chase's Sports News.